Welcome everyone to the work session of the Aspen City Council for July 13th. We are having a little bit of the technical issues again with where and how you can see us if you're not in the room. And so I'm going to have Pete kind of give us an update on that.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, apologies to folks online that's on our Zoom call. If you are watching on Zoom, you will be able to see the PowerPoint presentations, but when we have speakers speaking around the room, the video feed will not show the actual speakers that are discussing, but you will be able to hear them. So it will just be a visual impairment, if you will, on that particular case. Both the YouTube channel and other options are still streaming fine.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And the other thing I'd like to do before we really get started is to ask my council members, were there any items on the information update that you would like to ask questions about or discuss? We do have staff in the room who can answer your questions on those things. But if there's none, we will move along and let the staff who's in the room go further on to their other activities and duties. So thank you so much. And we'll be seeing some of you tomorrow night, Tuesday, for the true thanks for the great work that all our departments did on the 4th of July. Thank you so much for being here. All right, so now we're going to just take it away with the first presentation, which is the financial update and budget assumptions. This is done in advance of all our departments formalizing their budget request for next year, and our staff's going to lead us through that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Tyler Sexton, Finance Director. Like the Mayor alluded to, we're going to be talking about the financial update and budget assumptions. Team with me, I have Andrew Kramer. He's our new Deputy Finance Director. You might recognize him. He used to work for the city about 3 years ago, moved on to Dallas, and then had to come back.
It was the curse of the Utes brought you back.
So very happy to have him back. We have Jessica Roberts, our Human Resource Director. She's going to talk about the comp and class. And assisting is Alyssa Farrell, our Administrative Service Director. So. I assumed I wasn't going to let you all wait for the projection, so I kicked it off on the first slide. In 2026, we're looking at a 0.09% growth, followed by a 1.7% increase in 2027. The following slides, we're going to kind of walk through kind of how we got to these assumptions, and hopefully by the end, kind of see how we landed. So. So the first slide is the 2026 taxable sales through April, currently down 4% year to date. I want to walk through some of the key drivers that kind of speak to the decline. All things kind of run through accommodations, and that's kind of where I want to start. Winter occupancy was down 6.4% compared to last winter season. March was probably the softest month of the year so far. Paid occupancy was down 15.3%. And that's per the ACRA reporting. On our end, we experienced about a 12% reduction for March. And what kind of softened that decline was a 5.6% increase in average daily rates. So with accommodations going down, less visitors, you can kind of see a decline in some of the other industries. So restaurants, food and drug, sporting goods, utilities, and liquor and cannabis. We have a big decrease in miscellaneous, about 34%, but that's mostly due to a one-time adjustment, about $13 million in taxable sales. If you were to exclude that adjustment, we're only really sitting at negative 1.8% for the year.
You know, and the thing is, you never mentioned the decreased snow that drove all these other numbers.
True.
Thank you.
Tyler, where did you say $13 or $18 million get reallocated?
It was, so what happened was last year all the way up to basically March, one of the businesses that were just outside of city limits was reporting taxable sales to us. We were reporting that to the state to tell them, like, hey, they're not in our jurisdiction, and they finally made the correction all at once in March, and so a significant amount of taxable sales kind of went back out. So that really
it's not reallocated anywhere in our numbers. Got it. Thanks.
Let's see. So Industries showing increase, we had fashion and clothing, jewelry and gallery, and construction. Fashion and clothing was up 3%. Experienced growth every month this year. Largest increases were in January and February, up 17% and followed by another 11%. Jewelry and gallery is up 18%, but overall, if you compare this to 2025's, January and February, they were down about 27% and 15%. So it's more so of a rebound, catching up from the prior year. And then construction up 8%. We're beginning to see the stabilization of that industry after making that change from self-collections to state collections. So, I mean, the key takeaway for this slide is, we're down 4% to start the year. We do have a lot more months to go. And if summer and shoulder season perform even at a moderate level, we can still hit our 2026 projections. So as the slide suggests, the strong 25 sets up a high bar. This time last year, we were forecasting about a 7% growth with a 3% increase into 2026. We finished 25, 10% higher, or finished at 10%, way more than we expected. And the result of that is 2026 being measured against a higher starting point. So this slide really just shows the projections of the seasonal performance against historical averages. Winter season, we're expecting about a 2% decline. Summer season, we're expecting about 3.3% growth. And then shoulder season, just a moderate 0.3% growth. And that should result in that 0.09% estimate for 2026. So if you dive into the numbers, December accounts for about 15% of the total taxable sales. So we're estimating that growth to be about 2% this December. Just to give some perspective, December's annualized growth is about 6%, so pretty conservative. Projections for summer is the 3.3. Historical average is 6.4%. Looking at the last 2 years of growth, we experienced about 16.5% growth in 2025 and then 7.3% in 2024. So it kind of alludes to the fact that our summers are starting to get a little more busier, and so it kind of justifies that growth of the 3.3. And then for shoulder season, we looked really closely at accommodations because, they are smaller months. They experienced some pretty high growth in those years. And so what we did is we kind of dialed back the accommodations for those specific months and kind of landed at that 0.3 to kind of blend it into a historical average. So the key takeaway was that 2026 remains flat with, even with it remaining flat, we still will hit our budget assumptions, so. Next slide. Before we jump into 2027, I just wanted to quickly talk about investments. Currently, right now, we have about $471 million invested with a yield of 3.68%. We did kind of change our investment strategy from 2025. We've historically done a laddered approach, meaning, we look at investments at 3 to 5 year installments to kind of have an easel or a pretty consistent investment return. Due to the large projects coming on board at the Armory and the Lumberyard, we've had tried to unwind, or as the investments become matured, we've been placing them into more short-term, 30 to 90-day commercial paper treasuries to ensure that we have that cash fund available come beginning of the year. The only thing to note that, the $471 million, we do expect that to drop significantly into 2027, so.
Okay, it's my one and only slide. So the 27 economic outlook, I want to cover the economic outlook and the budget assumptions. Our base budget growth, we have an assumption of 3.5% for FY27. That primarily is composed of a 3.5% non-labor and operating budget, non-labor operating budget growth. And then as we'll discuss here in a minute, comp and class is estimated at about $3.5 million. And then there will be some significant growth in our health insurance costs, primarily due to fund balance issues because of some large claims that we've had. Overall, our instruction to staff has been to focus on what can be accomplished. We want to limit our headcount growth, so there will be very few FTEs added to the total, if any at all. And then continue to create the culture of exemplary service that you all went through in budget development last year as part of the Workways program. Overall, inflation is kind of all over the place. When you put food and fuel in, we're at about 3.5%. If you take food and fuel out, we're getting closer to that 2% target for inflation that the Federal Reserve has, but still above where we are. So we feel pretty good that 3.5% will make sure that we are adequately funded to achieve the city's objectives, but not too overfunded where we will not be adequately deploying our resources.
Okay, we're going to talk about the 2027 budget assumptions. So as we know, the airport closure is planned from April 4th to November 19th. This is going to impact all of summer season and majority of the shoulder season. Current projections, we're looking at 3.1% growth for winter, summer at 0.3% decline, shoulder season at 0.5% decline, finishing up 2027 at a 1.2% growth. So in developing these projections, we considered several known factors. So the first thing we looked at was the ACRA survey. 2/3 of visitors said that the closure would likely have no impact on their summer plans to visit Aspen. We also looked at known hotel closures, so include some of the ones that we know of right now are the Gant and the Little Nell. Estimates is about 230 beds would come offline because of those closures, but with the addition of the White Elephant, bringing on another 54, that could help subsidize some of that. And then I also looked at some of the ACRA reporting. Even during peak season, the demand only raises to up to about 70%. So there's room to make up for that capacity. We also looked at the flight plans. United announced increased services to Eagle during airport closure. They're increasing their weekly flights from 25 to 63 flights. So if you look at that on a per day basis, it goes from 3 days to 6 or flights are going to go from 3 per day to 6 per day. And then also United is looking at the Chicago O'Hare and Houston services. Right now they're 2 times a week, and now they're going to move it to daily. So, and then lastly, we looked at historical averages. Specifically, we really targeted 2020 to see kind of what a complete shutdown would look like with, obviously not of that scale. But during that time, Aspen only really experienced 7% decline in taxable sales for 2020. So we kind of took all that information and built what we believe to be pretty conservative estimates. If you look at those compared to the historical averages, we're well below those. So the key takeaway for this is, the 2020 budget assumptions remain conservative despite the airport closure. So.
Let me ask a question or two, and then Bill has a question. Just wondering, are you talking to any of your colleagues in other major organizations, and does this kind of line up with how they're thinking about, whether it's the county budget or other budgets?
Yeah, I reached out to the county. They have yet to set their projections out, so they'll be doing that in the upcoming months. I've heard somewhere between, as high as 10, but 5%. It's just, no one really knows right now.
Sure.
But
I was just wondering if
Yeah.
But I think the way you've been looking at it is very thorough and competitive. And for our own acknowledgement and the public's, as things change, we can constantly update and modify what we need to do to maintain a healthy budget. Bill?
Yeah, along the same lines, I do think you've been very thoughtful in this analysis, but you also hit on something that I think we all need to remember is no one's really going to know what's going to happen here until it happens. It's so unprecedented. And so I think we need to stress test this and figure out what we're going to do if we got it wrong.
Right.
Where's the money going to come from? And so I hope, if you haven't done that already as we move towards full budget, I think we need to stress test this and do a downside of 10%, 15%, 20%, decline in taxable sales and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can, at least this time next year, when we get the first 3 months of the winter season, that will really dictate where we're sitting up. If winter sales or winter season is down or flat, that'll put a lot of pressure on summer and shoulder. So like the rule of thumb for the winter season, for every 1% that we see an increase, that can shift the overall taxable sales 0.5%. So if we see 7%, you know, we could realistically look at, you know, 4%, everything keeping flat. So that's kind of the rule, the gauge. Obviously, the summer shoulder seasons are a smaller portion of that. But, yeah, we're definitely going to keep a really close eye on
Yeah,
it.
but not just keep a close eye. Have a plan if
Okay.
that happens, is what my recommendation and my suggestion would be, so that we're not surprised by it and we're not, you know, we all acknowledge that that could be a possibility, could be an outcome here. We just don't know. And so we should be prepared, and we should say, all right, if we're down, if our taxable sales are down 15% or 20% for all of 2027, where's the money coming from?
Right.
I think that's a great point, Bill. And as much as we focus on our historic numbers, the ski industry, weather, all those things, there's a national dynamic surrounding us that may affect people's desire to spend money or ability to take vacations or things like that as well. And it's unfortunate to have to think about that, but we're in the Aspen bubble, but it doesn't mean the country's not at war and that there's not really major issues brewing. So, as I said, we'll keep checking in, and I really appreciate your idea of let's take a look at what a couple scenarios would be if and when we need to cut back.
And if I can just layer in, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of potential for downside risks on any forecast, just as there is some upside potential as well. The nice thing about the airport closure is it's actually a predictable and known event that's going to happen that we get a lot of foresight into, and we can start making plans. And obviously things like all of the nonprofit events that are scheduled are still anticipated to go on. You know, that's a big thing as opposed to a spur of the moment closure of the airport. People can't get here. We have to shut those down. That was what COVID was, right? That was that immediate effect where the tap just turned off and we didn't have the ability to make plans. Now that the county, the city, Snowmass, the entire valley is kind of working on transportation solutions with that airport closure, how can we still get people into town? It is nice that it's our drive-up market as well as opposed to our winter season, which is a lot more fly-in market. So there's a lot of things that are kind of benefiting us in terms of it being a drive-up market for us. So I would say there's a lot of encouragement, I guess, not to dismay or kind of discount, I guess, the aspect that there can be a downturn still as a result. The nice thing about that is we still sit on fairly healthy reserves in almost all of our funds. So there's a little less concern about, you know, even a blip of 5% swing. We can handle that without any issue. 10% swing, we can probably handle that without an issue. So that's kind of the good thing about where we're sitting at from a financial position. And we can also pace some of our capital and things like that if we need to.
Thanks.
Yeah, but exactly, I think that's the type of planning you're talking about, knowing, and then we have in the back of our mind. And since we've mentioned the airport, I should just say that there is a airport groundbreaking, is that tomorrow? That's
Wednesday
Wednesday.
is
The airport is Wednesday, 10 to 11:30. That's going to be at their operations center on Owl Creek Road. And then, but tomorrow night, while we have our meeting, so we're not going to be attending, they are having a buttermilk community gathering to discuss the airport and airport issues. So that'll be a good one to keep tabs on. I do know from the Chamber of Commerce, they had put out a request for qualifications for transportation companies, and they're feeling fairly good. They had some good people put their names in. So nothing further on that right now. Perfect. So please continue. If there was any other questions from anyone else, but otherwise, go ahead.
Next slide. So now we're going to shift gears into actual sales tax collections. Here's a breakout of the 2.7% city sales tax, as well as the 2% county-wide So the 2.7% sales tax broken out between the 1.5% parks and open space. All our projections right now looking at about 22 million. And on the right-hand side of this chart, we put in the fund balances to give everyone kind of a feel of where they're sitting at year-to-date through May 31st.
And real quick, just to layer back to the question of like, what if it's a 10% drop or something like that? So in the Parks Fund, that would be a little over a $2 million reduction in tax collections for that 1 year. And so, 1 year's worth of hit at 10%, I think we can absorb the 2 million through different mechanisms. That's where you'll see the biggest impact, obviously, in that particular chart when you see this sales tax spread out across all the different funds.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
So the 2.7% sales tax broken out to the 1.5% parks and open space, projected about 22 million. And then the 0.15% for transportation fund, that's about 2.2 million. And then 45% for the Kids First, split 80%, it's 5.3 million. And then the 0.45 housing development fund gets the additional 20% at 1.3, and then the public education fund at 8.7 million. In the 2% county sales tax, we get about 45% of that, and we're estimating around 20 million. So total all in for 2027 is 59.5 million. So here's the lodging tax and the STRs. We're projecting about a 3% decline for both STR and lodging. On the right-hand side, we have the allocations broken out. So the STRs get allocated the 6.3 million to 70% affordable housing, so that'd come out to about 4.4 million. 22.5% goes to the asset management fund, so 1.4 million, and then 7.5% goes to the general fund for environmental initiatives at 0.5. And then traditional lodging is 5.6 million is our estimates, and again broke out 75% to the promotional or tourist promotional fund at 4.2 million, and then 25% to transportation for 1.4 million. And then lastly, the real estate transfer tax. We're projecting a 15% decline for 2027. Just to note, this tax is very volatile. And it's very hard to predict. For 2025, I think all the way up to my last presentation, we were behind, and then as the year ended, we exceeded the budget and ended up being third highest collections of the city's history. So what we try to do is kind of reassess this back down to some, historical averages. I looked somewhere around 2022 to 2024, 2021, and it was right around 15 and 17 million. So again, these funds have very healthy fund balances. The Housing Development Fund of 135 million, which we do plan on spending, with arts and culture at 57.9. But we'll see how it comes out. Right now, year-to-date activity, we are down 6% on number of transactions, as well as a 28% decrease on average cash value. So still too early to tell, but those are just kind of early numbers that we feel comfortable plugging right now.
I think that's accurate. I think that's how you should do it. I was just reading a kind of interesting article about the Hamptons and how their prices have just doubled and doubled again, and they're just not seeing an end to it because there's such a limited supply. But the bigger issue was that it's more the very top high end that is selling, that continues to sell, versus what might be middle or lower.
Okay. So this is the last slide, just a summary of the discussion, kind of recap of all we talked about. And so if you have any follow-up questions, we're happy to answer them, or if not, we can roll right into the total comp and class.
We'll give it a second. Anybody have a comment or a question? John?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I found it really helpful and reassuring that our current city manager has a firm background in finance and was able to reassure us after Bill's excellent question.
Yeah, very true. There's a lot of paths forward for cutting, and cautious in terms of spending. I've mentioned it to Pete, and I'll just throw it out here. I don't think there's an exact spot for it, but if there's one thing that I really believe we're going to need to be funding going forward, it is the police department to be able to handle the type of crowds that we're having. And I just don't want burning people out because we're asking too much of them. And it's going to be a long time before we actually get the funding to build the entrance. And so managing traffic and public safety because of congestion and traffic is just sadly going to be with us for quite a while. You know, I've talked to Pete about looking for Jacobs as they finish their work, as it proceeds, to see what we can clear for interim steps or short-term steps before we have the real money from the state and the feds for the actual new bridge and the rural property. So I just think that we just don't want to stress out the police department, but the management of traffic congestion and those issues, especially perhaps next summer when it's a drive market only without being a fly market. So I know we've always kind of over allocated so that if they found a good candidate, they could recruit and deal with, you know, unanticipated departures like illness or whatever. But I think that that's just a real priority. And we've seen great effect from a little extra public safety and attention to the West End, which is, you know, that's become a grown problem. It was one thing when it was 10% of the town's traffic. It's another thing when it's 35%. So thank you. John?
Yeah, on a related note, Sam and I attended a garden party. Sam and I attended a garden party in West End yesterday, and there was a lot of gratitude for the increased police presence in the West End, a lot.
Yeah, I think it's made a difference, and public safety is absolutely one of our top callings, you know, so well, I'll just put it out there that we'll take a look at that when we do get to actual budget hearings. So please, any other questions or anything? Well, then we'll go on with the second half of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Roberts, Human Resources Director, and I'm here to walk you through our the total compensation approach for 2027. But first, I just want to say thank you to everybody that has been involved in helping us define this approach. It's really been a multi-department effort encompassing the finance team, strategy and innovation, our internal task force. We've had a lot of staff working on this and vetting this through. And I also want to thank you all, thank you council for your stewardship for both the community and employees. I think it's evident in the questions that you're asking. And I think that I hope that you'll find that this total compensation approach and our recommendation for 2027 aligns really nicely with council's defining principles. As this is a work session, I'm hoping that we can use this as an opportunity to see if council is generally supportive of us moving forward with this approach into the budget sessions where we'd ultimately get approvals for this. All right, next slide. And with that, I'll move into today's agenda. And what I'm going to be talking about are 3 connected strategies that direct our approach for 2027. One word that you'll probably hear quite a bit is competitive. This is just a real defining goal for us. Another one is having a self-funded health plan. This allows us to be nimble in times of change. And our total compensation philosophy. These strategies are really at the heart of how the city maintains our employer of choice position. All right. So I'll take a minute to just unpack the total compensation philosophy in a little bit more detail. This was included in your packet. It is a formal adopted document that guides every decision the city makes on pay and benefits. And it really rests on these 5 pillars that you see on the slide here. These pillars together keep our compensation, our total compensation, market leading. And I'll just briefly touch on each one, but perhaps most importantly, the first one I want to talk about is culture. So when you're thinking about culture in terms of total compensation, think values. Think why employees choose to come to work for the city of Aspen. So total compensation decisions are anchored in the city's values, and pay and benefits reinforce a positive workplace experience. So as part of our workplace social contract we have with staff, the city offers above-market pay and benefits. And not only that, our total compensation philosophy supports transparency and demonstrates the city's commitment to growth opportunities. I would have to say that much of the success the city has had in retention really points back to both our total compensation philosophy practices and our continued investment in pathways for employees to develop and advance in the course of their careers. So a key takeaway for you all, for council, is really that this philosophy is the framework that every recommendation that we are making in today's presentation ties back to, from how we fund benefits to how we set pay. And I want to encourage us to consider that, the community depends on the services provided by the city, and our strong total compensation philosophy statement directly supports the recruitment and retention of qualified staff who deliver these exceptional services that we rely on every day. And next, I'm going to move into the benefits budget, and it's really just intended to help us align with what you've heard from the finance team and to set us up for the upcoming budget approval process. Next slide, thank you. Okay, you heard a little bit about this. You had a snapshot of this from Andrew on his slide, but just taking a step back, rather than paying fixed premiums to a corporate insurer, the city manages our own health fund dollars. So this self-funding gives us more control over costs and allows us to reinvest any savings that we may have back into those above-market benefits that we offer to employees in the good years, while maintaining a healthy reserve to absorb any year-to-year claim fluctuations. So for 2027, our goal is to maintain a healthy reserve fund balance while offering above-market leading benefits to employees. Despite some of the challenges that we've had with rising healthcare costs, the city continues to invest back in employee health. And I'd like to just pause for a minute to say thank you to council for advocating for employees and their health, specifically Mayor Richards and other council members. Based on your direction, we have increased the health savings account contribution from the employer side from $1,000 to $2,000 in 2026. And we plan to contribute, to continue that funding in 2027 as well. So that'll again go through our budget process. Another way we invest in our employee health is through cost sharing. And so you'll see some of that on the slide. We plan to cover roughly 95% of the cost on the employee only and roughly 87% of the cost for all other tiers in this coming year. So that's another way in which we're reinvesting back in employee health. We have seen multiple years of higher than normal claims trend, and we do need to maintain and regrow our reserves for 2027. So working very closely with city manager and the finance team, we've determined that we'd like to build the health fund budget up by 10%. And this is really to help us meet our target reserves. So we're going to continue, our plan is to continue monitoring health claims trend before we finalize premiums as we get closer to the fall. An important nuance I just want to highlight is this up to 10%. And that figure it represents a budget ceiling, so it's not a hard and fast rate. And so just to reiterate, we want to build the budget up to 10% so that we're covered, and then we're going to keep monitoring claims and how those go through 2026, and then we'll determine the actual premium rates once we have more claims data. Another part of our strategy.
One second, we got to.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. Thanks,
Sorry.
Jessica. I know this is tricky because most people already live such healthy lifestyles in Aspen, but do we have any programs in place to incentivize healthier habits and in terms of how we subsidize premiums and sort of penalize those with unhealthier habits and to minimize our exposure and sort of also increase the quality of life of everyone to the maximum extent possible?
I had a question very similar to that, so thank you.
That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking it. So we do have a wellness program that is administered and designed by the Human Resources Department. Right now, that specifically provides you an incentive for seeing your PCP. What research has shown is that folks that have a really strong relationship with their PCP have...
No acronyms. Yeah.
Sorry about that. My
What is-
apologies.
what is a PC?
Primary care provider.
Thank you.
I was warned not to rely on HR acronyms, so thank you for catching me. I'll take that. So having a relationship with your primary care provider is critical to healthy outcomes, and that's something I think that's backed by research. Another area that we do is we do actually charge a premium on our health rates for tobacco usage. So we have kind of these two levers in place right now. Something I'm particularly excited about is we have a fully staffed human resources team, and we did just bring on somebody who has a really large background in wellness. And so I'm really excited to see where that program is going to go in the next year or so.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to ask along those lines, because in just thinking back, and I might not have the details right, with the county program, when we first really launched the Valley Health Alliance, was that you would get that kind of HSA contribution if you had an annual physical. And you would get that kind of contribution if you through the physical or the health fair had your blood work done. Do we have any requirements like that on getting the HSA contribution?
We don't have any right now. That doesn't mean that we can't explore that going forward. I think that's an excellent point. One of the reasons I would say that it's important to encourage people to have access to those health savings accounts is it lets them use those dollars right away for ongoing health.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just considering both advantages, plus and minus.
Well, maybe just think a way going forward that you might be able to incentivize it a little more. I truly appreciate the increased amount of HSA, because I think our deductible, like for a single, is about $4,500 a person. So that would help you cover half, or a little close to half of your deductible. And that's important. But as Bill's kind of saying, there should be some reasons for that sort of generosity of trying to keep yourself in good health.
If I may add, Mayor Richards, it's a really good point. I do serve on the Valley Health Alliance board. It's something that we're really active to stay in terms of aligned with best practices. We have done that previously. We are above benchmark for healthy blood work, the amount of employees receiving their annual physicals, the amount of employees that have a primary care provider, PCP. We are above benchmark currently.
Great.
So we continue that trend line and assess where we need to fill in the gaps with plan design too.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm not trying to dictate anything. I just wanted to see where we were at compared to plans I've looked at in the past.
Yeah.
Great questions.
I think we appreciate your input, and I wrote it down, so it's
Okay.
something that we will definitely bring back, at least some lines of thought around that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Thank you. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for your advocacy here.
Okay.
So I have one more little note on that one. I just wanted to note really quickly before we move on that, as Alyssa mentioned, we do continue to work with a number of partner organizations. One of those is the Valley Health Alliance. So that nonprofit, I think, is really important in terms of us understanding our population health here in the city and also in the community. So that gives us really good data. We also have worked on direct contracting relationships to help people access care at reduced cost, which I think that's a really important thing for our employees. So there's just a lot of other work that we're going to be working on for this year, and also to make long-standing improvements in the future, community-wide and for our employees.
I think that's huge. And again, I may be a little out of touch from when the Valley Health Alliance was first formed. It might be great to give us a little bit of a memo on that in the future of what they're doing. The one thing I really recall that was very important was that the physicians themselves, as part of the alliance, were developing what they would call paths of care for certain types of conditions, certain common conditions, so that if you had one person who's out there ordering 20 tests, but wait a second, the path of care says you really only need 3 or 4 unless there's some other things. It was about controlling cost on their end. And the bargain, of course, is that, when we choose to get our health care at Aspen Valley Hospital, Aspen Health, or the Valley, that keeps our are premiums and dollars flowing to support our local facilities. When we all say, oh, we have to go down to Denver to get this care, it just means our rates will go up next year because the hospitals are not getting the income support that they had before. So it's a very Rube Goldberg type of system,
That's a good example.
frankly, where you pull one lever and something else falls out of the ceiling. But we're trying our best, and I think everyone is expecting new changes in the healthcare market because so many people have had to drop their health care with the new Medicaid work requirements or the lack of the Obamacare subsidies. And once those hospitals start absorbing more indigent care, and then they renegotiate their contracts with the next year with the service providers, they make up that deficit. And so it's going to rebound to single payer and to group payer policies in our state and in our region. So I'm really glad you're paying such close attention.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll get you more information on that.
Yeah.
If I may, just for
Please.
everyone's benefit, so again, it's not terms that we're not an acronym fully on the same breadth of understanding. Valley Health Alliance is the VHA.
Right.
It's a nonprofit focused on quality, cost, and access in the regional Roaring Fork Valley. We actually have a board retreat coming up in September, so shortly thereafter would be a great time for an info-only memo. It's comprised of self-funded employers, includes Valley View, AVH, Rifle Hospital, Mountain Family Health, Aspen One, Pitkin County, and I hope I'm not forgetting anyone else, along with doctors. And
Snowmass Village, maybe? I'm not sure.
not
No,
at this time.
not this time. But anyhow, it has been a great effort for containing costs.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, next slide, Andrew. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to shift over to our competitive pay portion of the total compensation approach for 2027. And this is really intended to be high-level information to really support these folks in moving forward with the budget process, and obviously decisions will be made down the road during those budget approvals. So next slide. Thank you. So I was pretty excited about how this turned out. I think we did a really neat job with this study for 2027. And some of the things that we did were really working together with internal consultants, our internal team, our external consultants, and so I'm excited to just start highlighting this for you. But to assist the city in maintaining our competitive position, the city engaged with Graves Consulting to conduct our competitive pay study. If you know that, if you're around human resources at all, you know that pay structures must be reviewed at least annually. And given market fluctuations, it's always best practice, it's considered best practice to conduct a comprehensive study at least every 3 to 5 years. So Graves Consulting is a really well-established and well-regarded compensation consulting firm. They have worked with several of our local peer organizations. And this study brought together 3 complementary vantage points. So we used our external consultant to provide the market analysis and pay structure recommendations. We used our internal task force to lead a very thorough internal equity review, which was really cross-functional. And then department leaders have had the opportunity to supply key operational context and then position level details. So taking together these 3 viewpoints have really given us a pretty good look at both the outside market and then what it takes for the city to operate on a day-to-day basis in terms of how best to be supported by the total compensation approach. So next slide. So this slide is really trying to address why it matters and a little bit more on why we are working to do this for 2027. So the city's ability, it's really just actually fundamental here, but the city's ability to deliver services depends on attracting and retaining qualified employees. This study represents a deep review of the city's compensation framework, our external market alignment, and internal equity. It also gives the city a stronger basis for making compensation decisions consistently over time. The study's objectives, I'll just point back really quickly, they're guided by the city's total compensation philosophy, and this supports both employees and the organization. Our aim here is to remain highly competitive while still making recommendations that we really think are financially sustainable and appropriate for council's consideration. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. This is our estimated impact, really to help us make some decisions in the budget approval process. The goal of this presentation, this slide, is to really lay out the estimated financial impact of the market analysis, the market adjustments that we want to make as a whole. So the total estimated impact is about 3.5 million. That's fully loaded. That incorporates the payroll costs, et cetera, the payroll tax costs, affecting roughly 370 employees. On average, the average employee adjustment is going to be about 7%. And then that average increase translates roughly to about $7,500 annually per impacted employee. And these are on averages. I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the impact that we're aware of. The city does continue our work on the total compensation task force to do some internal evaluation as we move through this. I would also like to point out that this market adjustment is a one-time realignment. It brings us to our above market target that we are looking for, whereas we're also suggesting that we can go into for an up to 4% annual increase that we typically do year to year for employees. So to say that a little bit better, one realigns us to our market target, and then the other one is our ongoing yearly increase that we fund each year. So there's two mechanisms on this slide that I just wanted to highlight.
Okay, thank you for that.
Any comments?
Do we have questions?
On that one?
Given the magnitude of our budget overall, I don't think that this is unreasonable as an amount, and I think it's appropriate. What I've looked at it with some concern is, are we losing the ability to hire people perhaps on some of the lower end paying jobs? And yet those are some very, very important jobs going forward, whether it's parking control, having enough officers in the West End, things like that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
John?
I just had a quick question about the 370 employees. Is that how many the city of Aspen has at this point?
That was who was in our active roster when we ran the financial impact. So that might fluctuate a little bit with folks coming and going.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Just continue. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you both. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up in our summary slide. And I just wanted to thank you for your time and attention to this. I know that there's a lot to sit through and think about from your roles. But to bring it back together to the why, the work here is really about our turnover and recruitment pressures. You know it, and we know it, but when we compete for talent, we compete in a really complicated labor market. And so we're just trying to really make sure we can understand the cost of labor here, locally and regionally, and that's something that the study has been able to help us do. And again, our goal is to remain highly competitive so that we can have the sustainable workforce that the community depends on. So hopefully everything that you've heard today kind of aligns back to our total compensation philosophy and council's guiding principles. And thank you so much again for your time. And I think our last question, and you may have already addressed it, but we just generally want to understand if council is supportive of us moving forward in the budget process with our approach.
Head nods, we're generally supportive.
Yeah, one qualifier is that I want to be sensitive to the data that shows that very few people leave because of compensation, leave the organization because of compensation. Not zero, but very few. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it benefits the organization or the community to significantly overcompensate people. I think being competitive is one thing. I think being uncompetitive is a different thing and puts us at a disadvantage long term. Mm-hmm. So I want to be sensitive and thoughtful to that, but I'm supportive of this.
Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else? John?
Yeah, I think we'll probably all talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but the 4th of July, it really struck me by how many City of Aspen employees were on the front lines working. Police department,
Holiday.
parks, on a day that most Americans take for granted that they'll have it off. That really moved me, actually, on the 4th of July to see how many city employees were out there working. So I fully support this.
Yeah, and I agree with exactly what you're saying, Bill. I think it's an interesting dynamic on that chart when you look at housing as one of the big reasons, and yet people's ability to afford their housing, depending on their rent and situation, is related to their compensation. So it's all in one big mess.
It's complicated variables,
Yeah, thank you.
certainly.
And I don't want to forget special events.
Yeah, they did a lot. Okay, so we'll move on to the next part of the agenda. And you've gotten your answer. Everyone is supportive of using this approach going forward in the budget.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thanks to your whole team who had to sit through far more boring meetings than we did.
It's all yours.
But can I plug this in for power?
Yes, absolutely.
You're always making me look good. Awesome.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Claire McLaughlin, Sustainability. Is that green light on?
No.
Now it is. Hi, I'm Claire McLaughlin, Sustainability Manager, and I'm here to present the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan, also known as the ASAP update. We'll be talking about progress from the past year and next steps. And I'm presenting on behalf of an incredible team, many of whom are here. And this is the Environmental Health and Sustainability Department, but really the ASAP reflects work across all departments, from parks to transportation to utilities and on. So this is really an amalgamation of all that work and kind of our blueprint forward. So tonight, the request of council is to get your feedback on the updated ASAP and its future implementation. And next steps, with that and considering that feedback, staff will come back to you all for approval of the ASAP at a future consent calendar later in the summer. So to accomplish that, here's our agenda for the evening. We'll start with some background, a little bit of why we have an ASAP and how it came to be, a high-level review of what's in the document. We'll talk mostly about what's been implemented in the past year and what those associated next steps are for council. And then we'll share about a grant we won called the Local Impact Accelerator Award, and we'll end with questions and discussions. But if you want to stop, interrupt for questions along the way, I am good with that too. Okay, so to kick off with some background, so the reason we have an ASAP is we're already seeing climate change impacts in this valley. I know you recently heard an update from Aspen 1. We've lost 30 days of winter. This has impacts on not only our health with wildfire smoke, but also heat, infrastructure, water availability. We're already seeing these climate change impacts, and Aspen has always been a leader in trying to tackle them head on and really steward this work across the valley. And that started back in 2007 with the first iteration. It looked a little different than the ASAP today, but our original climate action plan started way back when. And it's slowly been updated and renamed and reformed over the years to the vision we have today. In response to those climate change impacts and that leadership initiative, back in 2022, City Council set science-based targets. So that's our fair share of emissions reductions, and that's 63% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and a 100% reduction by 2050. To accomplish those reductions, City Council provided staff direction in 2023 to enact the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan, which is full of objectives and strategies and action items to hit those emission reduction targets. When council gave that direction, they directed staff to implement the plan, and they also directed staff to annually update the plan. Sorry, I keep hitting it. To annually update the plan to reflect stakeholder feedback, make sure we're keeping up with the times and what's actually working on the ground, and also provide council with an information only or some sort of update to see progress. When we complete action items from the plan, they leave the plan and they get on something called the sustainability report, which was one of the attachments in your agenda packet. So to orient us a little bit on the background and kind of how it's set up as a document, so we have a greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we do every few years. This is our most recent one, which uses 2023 data. And this shows our high impact areas, so where are most of our emissions coming from as a community. The plan strategizes around those impact areas to make sure we're leveraging kind of our best efforts. Where can we make the best impact? And so that would be reducing emissions from residential and commercial stationary energy, or we colloquially call that buildings, transportation, and waste. And you can see the plan is set up in that way to reflect those high impact areas: energy supply, buildings, transportation, waste, and aviation and airport. Before we get into it today, I want to flag that aviation and airport is beyond the scope of today's work session, but it is an important part of our plan because Aspen is a driver of some of those emissions. We have, the way you do a greenhouse gas inventory, we have to make sure that we're accounting for some of those aviation emissions that we bring from our tourists and our community members. While that is an area of our plan that we can influence, it is not something we have direct jurisdictional control over. But I do think it's exciting to mention with the modernization of the airport, there's definitely opportunity there to work with Pitkin County and influence things like transit, the green building, and then they're already doing really cool things like working on sustainable aviation fuels and things like that. So we're always excited to partner with the county and support them on that work. Okay, a fun new addition for 2026, in direct response to Council's resilience goal, we wanted to highlight the amazing ecosystem, human health, resilience work that's already happening across the city to ensure that it's captured in the plan and we're really moving this work forward. These are things that don't quite fit in those neat buckets of greenhouse gas inventory emissions, but they're really interdependent and really important for the health of our ecosystem and community. And those include air quality, nature and resilience, and water conservation. All very hot topics this summer. Okay. So now I'm going to go through each of those sections or sectors I talked about, and I'll share kind of what was accomplished in 2025 and what are the next steps or asks of council coming up. So first, we have energy. In 2025, Aspen Electric, our municipal utility, hit a huge milestone by maintaining renewable electricity for 10 consecutive years, which is truly amazing, and that really enables our electrification work and efforts to be effective and green. The next step is an electrification study, which is already underway, and the results will be shared with you all later in 2026. And that's going to look into the impacts of electrification. What are the impacts on the utility, on feasibility, on costs, things like that. So we're excited to dig into that with you at the end of the year.
John?
Claire, will that have any impact on our discussions about requiring electrification in the future for possible?
It may.
Yeah, yes, it'll all be embedded in a few future work sessions to make sure that council has all the information you need to give direction on those codes.
Excellent. We look forward to it.
Yeah.
So very related, buildings in 2025 saw a lot of progress. So there were 179 efficiency and electrification projects that we partnered with CORE to do. The Buildings Department issued 505 permits under updated energy codes. That matters because those codes are really efficient buildings, which is exciting, and we required sub-metering for new commercial buildings. Next steps associated with that electrification study, we'll be coming back to you with various departments and staff together as a team on a series of work sessions between this summer and the end of the year on electrification and policy options for not only new buildings, but existing buildings, code alignment to make sure that we're making everything work in the same direction when it comes to electrification across our codes, and then also evaluation of cost and feasibility. Like, what is this going to take and what is council direction around that? Next, we have transportation. In 2025, we saw some big wins on multimodal transport, which is really cool considering council's traffic and congestion goal. So transit ridership on Aspen routes of RAFTA increased by 12%. WeCycle ridership increased by 30% in Aspen. And public EV charging network saw a 23% utilization. And that, per industry standards, is heavily used. So that means that that service we're providing is something that people are using to hopefully drive up the adoption of electric vehicles. And that has been taking the equivalent of 20,860 gallons of gasoline off from being used.
Nice.
And what's exciting on the transportation front is that master plan, which enabled the development of that EV infrastructure, is sunsetting in 2026 because it was a 5-year plan. So staff will be coming back to you at the end of the year for direction on strategy. So what's next for EV infrastructure development? Next, we have waste, which always has lots going on, a lot of cool stuff. So in 2025, not only did staff implement the construction and demolition debris diversion ordinance, but also conducted outreach for the second phase of the organics ordinance, which now in 2026 is underway and rolled out. And next steps, very timely, you will be hearing from Elizabeth and the C&D team tomorrow to update that code to really streamline it, streamline fees, make sure it's working best for the people that are involved in development and construction. You will also be hearing from the team later in the year to update Title 12, which is the solid waste code. And that's to improve clarity and really make sure that that code, which hasn't been touched in a while, really meets the need of our wildlife, our bears, and operational needs. Okay, the fun ones, the new ones, ecosystem and human health. Air quality. So tons of progress happened in 2025, which is really exciting and really responsive to a lot of community interest. When we see smoke events, when people are interested in being healthy, it's really cool to see that we have programs to respond to those needs and desires. So in 2025, staff expanded the Radon program, launched mitigation grants, and launched a partnership with CORE to increase incentives for replacing your gas stove with an induction stove. And that matters because that's been associated with cleaner indoor air. No immediate council direction is needed, but staff will bring an info-only memo at the end of the year to update you all on the progress of these programs.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in the radon results. I'm sure we all would, but, and the businesses and things like that.
More to come.
Thank you.
Next, we have nature and resilience. In 2025, there was tons going on. And again, you can see all of this in the sustainability report where all of the wins are laid out. But to highlight a few, there was a large nonprofit, private, public partnership to address Douglas fir beetle kill on Aspen Mountain, which was exciting. And then also led by the Parks Department and other Aspen Fire and partners, there was a fuels reduction project over at the Castle Creek Bridge and the Water Department to really help with wildfire resilience. Again, no council direction is needed immediately, but staff will continue to implement the urban forest management and fuels reduction plans that are already in place. And finally, water conservation. So 2025, staff implemented conservation programs such as the Commercial Water Efficiency Challenge and providing irrigation assessments and rebates. Those are all programs outlined in the Water Efficiency Plan. And the next steps is the utility staff and the Drought Response Committee team will return to council later this summer to update you all on Stage 3 drought outcomes and how things are going. Now, a fun thing we got to add in the ASAP this year was all the supporting programs. There's some interstitial programs that don't fit neatly into a sector, but really get the community engaged in sustainability work. 2 of those programs include our Colorado Green Business Network of Aspen, CGBNA, which is a partnership with ACRA. And 2025 highlights include growing the membership from 3 to 15 in its second year, and in the program's only second year became the second statewide in recognized businesses, which is pretty sweet. That means 11 of these businesses received either a gold, silver, or bronze recognition from the state, which is pretty awesome for their sustainability work.
Who's first?
I think Denver,
That makes sense.
but I'll have to check that, fact check me
They're a little
later.
bigger. You got a little more
But
opportunity.
we're gunning. Jimena and Baker run this program, and I
I
said,
was
I'm
going to be mad if you
competitive.
said Vail.
Let's gun for number 1. We'll see, though. They do have a lot more businesses, so that might be a problem. The second supporting program to really engage the community has been Commit to Tomorrow and Seamos Sostenible. It's a Spanish language counterpart, which is an environmental awareness campaign to get community involved in all of our environmental actions that we have available. So some progress in 2025 was launching the Youth Sustainability Ambassador Grant, which I know some of you saw, and also hosting 18 events with over 3,000 participants. The next steps for this program is in 2027, we're proposing increasing that youth grant from a pool of $2,500 to $4,000, because we had tons of interest and a lot of excited middle schoolers. And staff will continue to implement those programs and events, because we'd love to see that participation increase even from 3,000.
You know, I was able to attend the awards and the presentations of the projects that those teams put together, and it was just really great. And to see the response of the parents and how they had encouraged their kids and watched their kids, and they were growing through this process in a big way. It was very meaningful, and I just want to thank you for putting it together and involving the youth.
Yeah, thank you, and shout out to Izzy, who co-ran that program.
Very nice.
All right, getting to the end of our agenda here. So I wanted to share that the City of Aspen has been awarded the Local Impact Accelerator Award. This is exciting because in all our iterations and updates of the ASAP, what we've heard from council is go try to find some outside funding to support this work and to galvanize this work. And we did just that. So the City of Aspen led a cohort of communities across Eagle and Pitkin counties to receive this grant from the Colorado Energy Office of over $4 million. About $1 million will go to Aspen, and it was divided based on a complex equity-based matrix we made. And that funding will help Aspen and these other communities work towards adopting advanced building energy codes that promote all-electric new construction and provide energy efficiency and electrification incentives for community building retrofits. So how can we get more money out to the community to make these updates to buildings? This is all in alignment with the work you've already seen on electrification and will be in lockstep with that. So you will see this these updates, anything related to code, you'll see at future work sessions. And I also want to note, this does not lock us into having the same building codes as all those other communities. We're just working towards progressing together as a region.
Okay. John?
I just want to say this really means a lot to me about working regionally and how important that is, working regionally and then approaching the state and having the state buy into this. This makes me really happy to be part of a progressive government and part of a progressive state.
It's exciting. And we heard from you all, especially when it comes to buildings work, which can be so expensive, find money for community incentives, do more incentives. And so we tried to get as much of this grant as possible for community incentives. And something interesting is each of these communities, which are going to get their own chunk of that incentive money, have different ideas for how they want to spend it. Our pitch is to do some retrofits on affordable housing, but different communities will use the money to fit their own needs. The next steps for this is when we have a finalized and signed contract that will, of course, return to council for approval. So with that, just as a reminder of next steps, considering any feedback you have today, we'll return to council with an approval of the ASAP at a future consent calendar, hopefully later this summer. That's it.
Very good.
Awesome.
Pretty amazing work through your department, and having a winter like this and a summer like this, we're all hoping it's an anomaly as opposed to a baseline for a new normal, but it's very, very hard to say. And having lived here 45 years, I've personally seen the impacts of the climate change. I was talking to my brother who lives in Maryland still, and he goes down to the beach in Delaware, and we were talking about the broader issue, and he said, oh, well, you don't have to go to these other places to see the impact. The bay is regularly, rising and coming over the roads down here, and they're looking at plans to maybe add sand to the bay, to the bay, so that all the marshes aren't taken out, and so that it's not becoming a deep water bay where it never has been before. And of course, if you're along the Chesapeake, you have the saltwater intrusion that it's taken out 25,000 acres of arable soil in the past, and they can't keep it out. So everybody sees their own different effects. We're not going to get the hurricanes of Florida, but these wildfires are more than enough. And so I think it's good that we continue this work. I know it's important that we all feel that it's leading towards those goals and that we're not just kind of randomly throwing spaghetti at the wall, so to speak. But this is very targeted, and this is dealing with our highest waste areas and emission areas. And I think it's appropriate for a town that has championed the environment for decades and prides itself on body, mind, and spirit. So thank you all for your work on this. And I'll turn to other council members for any comments or questions. Christine?
Yeah, just thank you. There's a lot of information and a lot of work that went into this. It was very thorough. And I just keep thinking of tying it to the information update about Rudai and the cutting of power production there later this summer. It's all extremely timely, unfortunately. So thank you.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I spent a lot of time at the Colorado Municipal League sessions every year. Didn't get to go this year, but it's amazing not only that we have a sustainability department, but that it's more than just one person.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, a lot of communities don't have them, and the ones that do, it's normally one person. So to have a team like this, we're really blessed that this community takes climate change seriously, and we are throwing everything we can at it.
Yeah, very good. Any other comments or anything? Otherwise, I think that's it for the agenda, isn't it?
It is for tonight.
That's it for the agenda.
Thank you
We
all.
can all go home by 5:15. Thank you, Grassroots, and thank you so much for all the work that goes into this. It may seem like a short presentation, but it's years in the making. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, all.
Yeah.